You of all people should know the truth by now. But this is war.
Well then. Go on, make it happen.
Yo, what is up everybody? Jay the Great here, back with another Naruto versus matchup. And for this one, I'm accompanied by my bro who's certainly one of the best new content creators in this game, Sage of Thick Calves. Do you want to say hi to the people,
Yo,
man?
what's up, dude?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
man.
coming on, bro.
It's good to be on the channel. It's been a long time in the making. Excited
Yes,
to be on
sir.
here, and we're gonna cook up a nice fresh meal for these folks.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And if you haven't already, I'm sure many of you have, but if you haven't, make sure to go check out his channel. He has great Naruto content and crossverse content as well. If you didn't know, very good crossverse content as well. So for today's video, we will be discussing and analyzing Itachi versus Obito, all forms, excluding Obito, since the conclusion to that one is too obvious. We thought this matchup would be an interesting one to discuss, as the narrative itself seemingly always implies them to be rivals right from the moment they're introduced to each other, which of course has made many wonder in the Naruto fandom who would have beaten each other between the two if they did happen to battle. Hence, we will be matching up the versions of Obito and Itachi we believe are the most competitive and or the most intriguing to make the video as entertaining as possible. Lastly, for the video, we will be utilizing the manga, databooks, and novels. So we're gonna use that as empirical evidence for this video. So without further ado, let's just straight get into it. So the first matchup that we decided would be interesting to discuss and go over is Kid Itachi versus Kid Obito, or more specifically, Itachi up until he becomes an Anbu member, and Obito up until the moment he is crushed by the boulder during the Third Great Ninja War. So starting off with Itachi, as we all know, Itachi was considered a prodigal figure, even from a very young age, impressing all his peers and teachers to the point where he's even stated to be the most talented shinobi ever seen at the academy by them, which is an impressive feat considering all the prodigal figures that have come in and out of the academy over Naruto history. Additionally, he is stated of even having the wisdom of a Hokage at only the age of 7, becoming a Chunin at 10, and awakening the Sharingan at only around the age of 8. Now, as far as combat feats, he doesn't really have any at this point in time canonically in the literature. There is, the novels where him and Shisui fight the very high-ranked Byakugan user from the Hyuga clan. However, physically, it's quite apparent they are inferior, and it had to come down to Shisui using his Kodo, which really is a save-all type of jutsu when all else fails. So that does display Itachi and Shishui's intelligence. However, physically, with this Hyuga clan individual being a very high Jonin level individual, it's quite apparent that perhaps Kid Itachi still hasn't reached that rare area at this point in his career. But, again, being impressive to teachers that have taught probably hundreds, if not thousands of shinobi over their career, and being stated as the most talented ever, at least deserves some praise. So perhaps he's at that Jonin level. Perhaps being very, very generous, at least low tier. I think most people can agree with that. Maybe more than that, but again, there's just not many empirical feats for him as far as physical feats are concerned. But he's certainly respected and obviously one of the best prodigal figures at that age in the Naruto verse and in Konoha history. But did you have anything to add to that and to Itachi scaling low here? Add to that a bit.
Yeah, Pre-Anbu Itachi is kind of a lore goblin because he doesn't have a ton of crazy showings. I will say the novels do imply that he is more impressive than his Jonin team leader. But his Jonin team leader is just stated to be one of the weakest Jonin, if not the weakest Jonin.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult to ascertain what exactly that means. We know that he is able to spar with Shisui, and they split wins, but Shisui is winning the vast majority of those, and they're not using their Sharingan. And it's Shisui's whole thing is the body flicker, which he probably got so proficient at because he can ascertain opponents' movements with the Sharingan. So if you're eliminating that, then you're eliminating most of his toolkit. So he is definitively below that mid to high Jonin tier, maybe encroaching on the low Jonin tier, but where he makes up for his actual physicals and just his scaling overall is with his intellect and mind. He is just a genius. We see that he is able to, obviously this is later on, but once he enters the Anbu, basically by his first mission, he's already memorized all of the Anbu tactics and basics, so his mind is on a different level. And
Yeah.
he's able to utilize this in the Chunin exams against his opponent, who's a lightning style user, who is at his strongest whenever he's asleep. So what he does, he literally goes to sleep during the middle of the match, and then just like gets a massive boost. Itachi's able to outmaneuver him, get some space, use strategy to slowly but surely work his chakra from his Sharingan into the kid's mind and take over it by causing him to have nightmarish hallucinations under Genjutsu every time he closes his eyes, which then forces this kid to keep his eyes open, which then weakens him to where he can't actually fight. So he does have just like, number one, a great strategic mind. Number two, he already has really, really good Genjutsu prowess at this point in time. So those two things are going to be really important here, even if his scaling isn't all that impressive.
Yeah, that's actually a great feat to bring up, because that's first of all, it's diabolical. Secondly,
Yeah.
at that age, that's
Well,
very
the kid
impressive.
quits. He quits being a shinobi afterwards.
Oh my
He's like, I'm
God.
done. I can't do this anymore.
He
It's so
retired
bad.
somebody. That's a feat. Retiring
Yeah.
someone from ever being a shinobi, dude, that's insane. And that, like you said, that really displays and like illuminates how fine-tuned his genjutsu and his strategic mind already were, which is crazy to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's a great feat. So now getting into Obito's scaling and lore. With Obito, we can all agree, prior to the Third Green Ninja War and prior to being crushed by a boulder and moments before that, he's fodder in comparison to Itachi. He's not even in his league. But
Yeah.
once he awakens his Sharingan, firstly, we all know he eliminates a Jonin, a stone Jonin, to save Kakashi from being eliminated. It is stated in the data books that that specific Jonin has never failed a mission. Now, even if you want to be a logic dude and say, well, it could be hyperbolic, it doesn't matter, because what it is at least implying, and you can't refute this, is that he is a reliable and very, very trustworthy Jonin, implying a high level Jonin at this point in time. Then him and Kakashi conjunctively, with, keep in mind, Kakashi being a Jonin as well, fighting the other Jonin that had Rin captive. Well, they fought conjunctively, and while you could say, oh, he had Kakashi's help, he's not a Jonin, he was combating and reacting to this very high-level Jonin, as a matter of fact, which is very impressive, again, alongside Kakashi. After he awakened his Sharingan, his scaling jumped leaps and bounds, right? He was able to kill an individual quite quickly. You could argue, being fair, that the guy was off guard. Arguably, he wasn't, certainly not expecting that. He didn't expect someone to kind of flesh out his camouflage jutsu and actually see him. That was probably the last thing on his mind. But however, you cannot refute the fact that his scaling did jump leaps and bounds, and that he was combating, well, while conjunctively, combating a high-level Jonin after the fact as well. So the guy can be said to be perhaps low Jonin, high tuning. He certainly jumped leaps and bounds after this. But yeah, did you have anything to add to that and to his scaling here and his lore?
Yeah, so I think it's worth noting that the fourth data book talks about the Kanami Bridge mission as being a turning point in the war. And the Kanami Bridge itself was ultra important because that's where the Stone Shinobi were transporting their materials. And so you have to think that if you look at the data book statements for the three Jonin that were assigned there, they all have impressive resumes and they're all specialists in individual fields. But these are the three guys that Oniki was like, hey, dude, you hold this down or otherwise we lose the war. So these guys were incredibly powerful. And in
Yeah.
particular, Kako, the guy who has like the blades coming out of his wrists. So that guy is noted to be an extremely powerful Jonin, which would connotate with at least high Jonin tier. He's stated to be proficient in all forms of combat. He's got many years of combat experience. And this is the guy that Obito and Kakashi, who's also a Jonin, are able to combat. Now, like Jay said, people kind of like try to discredit Kakashi's Jonin rank, but the
Yeah.
problem with that is the only indication that we get for accelerated appointment for particular ranks is just people graduating the academy. There's no evidence that they got promoted to Chunin or Jonin faster, and in fact, the data books kind of imply otherwise. They just say that they were pushed through the academy quicker so that they could get on a Jonin team and gain experience, but whenever you're a Jonin, you're put in charge of leading Shinobi teams, so that's ultra important as well. So with Kakashi being on that Jonin tier, and even though he's wounded and fatigued, being able to like move relative to him, combat relative to him, and then combat relative to Kako is incredibly impressive. And I think actually gives Obito the scaling advantage here, even if he has disadvantages in other areas.
Right.
So he is much more impressive than people think. I mean, I think people think that Obito is just this, like, trash bag dumpster fire of a character,
Really.
and it's like he's able to like react to and like block attacks from this guy who's arguably one of the strongest, if not the strongest Jonin in all of Iwa. So it's like
Yeah.
they're pretty strong. But yeah, that is the most impressive thing that he does. I will say his intellect is not really anything to write home about, and his
Right.
arsenal is basically just these hands, kunai, and a fireball jutsu. So I think up against somebody like Itachi, who has already established the Crow substitution, who already has high level Genjutsu, a higher Tomo Sharingan, all of those things, he would have to have a massive scaling advantage to be able to take him down, and I don't think that kind of gap exists.
Agreed. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And to Steelman Sage's argument with the data book statement he referenced, even logically, if you think about it, right? This dire mission needs to be accomplished. So obviously, anyone that Onuki and the higher ups of the stone are going to send are going to be their best. It's very obvious to
Yeah.
logically conclude that. So clearly, right, the guys that they sent were top of the line. They had to send I mean, there's a whole worldwide ninja war going on, and they wanted to win at all costs. So of course they're going to send their best. So again, Obito, even conjunctively, working alongside Kakashi and defeating in a close quarter combat situation, this Jonin is extremely impressive. And it, again, like Sage said, despite Kid Obito being, kind of fodderized by the community, he is very powerful at this point in time. Now, as far as win conditions, Sage kind of got into that a little bit. Itachi has a better mind. We could say that, being stated to have, again, wisdom of the Hokage at 7, more fine-tuned, ninjutsu, probably better visual prowess, having the 3 Tomoe, like Sage said, and Obito having the 2. But Obito, again, being able to do what he did against this Jonin is quite impressive. But a good
Yeah.
point that Sage already said is, there have to be a large gap to kind of eliminate perhaps the tangible advantages Itachi has over Obito, such as the fine-tuning of the ninjutsu, the genjutsu, the visual prowess, the intelligence. And I do agree that there would have to be a large gap for that to be sort of negligible. So because of that, Itachi does have several win conditions. Genjutsu, of course, very fine-tuned. His intelligence, his ninjutsu prowess and efficiencies, such as Shuriken Jutsu. Obito, it's kind of a battle of finesse versus power, essentially. Itachi has the finesse in this situation. Obito has, perhaps more power and higher physical prowess at this point in time, based off his feats, which again, Itachi doesn't really have any. So this is an interesting battle. But yeah, did you want to get into that, Sage? Who do you think takes it in the end? And what win
Yeah.
conditions as well?
Yeah, so I think whenever you just examine where they're at, again, Obito has better definitive physical scaling,
Yeah.
but the problem is that's kind of countered by Itachi having the superior Sharingan. We see the difference in Sasuke's reaction in the final valley from going to 2 Tomo to 3 Tomo, getting juggled and like barely being able to react to K and Zero Naruto, to then being able to just like weave him effortlessly. So
Yeah.
that kind of thing would exist here. But then we also have Itachi should have better ninjutsu. I mean, his fireball is stated to only be rivaled by Fugaku and Shisui whenever he's, prior to entering the Anbu. So he should have better ninjutsu in that regard. Also, again, the crows, also shadow clones, which we have no evidence that Obito can even do.
Yeah.
So I think whatever physical advantage he has is just like cleared by Itachi's superior mind, superior Sharingan, and superior ninjutsu arsenal.
Agreed. Yeah. So essentially, it would be superior finesse taking this one. He would certainly most likely I'll strategize Kid Obito, and from there defeat him in a battle just due to the advantages he does have. But that was quite interesting. But yeah, that's what we have for that one. Going to the next one here, we now jump into Anbu Itachi versus Yellow Mask Obito, where let's just say the true power of one will be revealed to a lot of people who we believe don't realize how truly powerful he is as a
Yeah.
shinobi at this point in his career. But did you want to get into Anbu Itachi's scaling here and lore first here in a bit?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Itachi was already impressive before he unlocked the Mangekyo Sharingan, being implied by Shisui to be able to take down the entire fighting force of the Uchiha clan by himself. Whenever Shisui is going to use his Kodo on Fugaku, he basically tells Itachi, like, hey, don't go to the meeting. I know that you can take care of Yashiro and the rest, but, like, there's just going to be uproar. And Yashiro and the rest is literally every single Uchiha member that is getting through Jonin. So it's like
Crazy.
every single one of them would be there. And whenever we look, you may be like, oh, well, there probably wasn't that many, right? No, there were a lot. Whenever you look at Obito's hideout where he's got all the Sharingan eyeballs, those are from the massacre. And in the manga, I believe we get to see like 54 pairs of them on the wall behind him. But in the anime, it's like 85. It's just like a wider shot. Either way, there's at least dozens of Uchiha there who wield Sharingan and are shinobi in their own right, including several Jonin. So the fact that Itachi, before getting the Mangekyo Sharingan, is implied to be able to take down dozens of shinobi, including multiple Jonin, is kind of crazy. But then you go on to have him awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan after Shisui's death, which Shisui implies would allow for Itachi to surpass him in power once he awakened his own Mangekyo abilities. And then there's a year that passes between Shisui's death and the massacre, and you have the massacre being his last mission as an Anbu member, so we can include everything from that. And in the massacre, we actually get to see he uses the Amaterasu and the Tsukuyomi, and we know that he said to Sasuke in the Battle of Brothers that after he had unlocked those abilities in his eyes, that the Susanoo also took root in his eyes. So we should also have at least a low-level Susanoo.
Yeah,
So
very least.
Itachi is a dog, bro. Like, Itachi is an absolute monster. He has access to all of these abilities. His scaling puts him on the level of, dare I say, low Kage at least. And then, you know, the Sharingan prowess that he shows off right after the massacre, being able to take down Orochimaru with a base Sharingan Genjutsu. Like, he's just built different. So this is a much, much more powerful Itachi. But Yellow Mask Obito is also a thing to scoff at. You want to kind of go over his scaling?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So adding to Itachi real quick. Yeah. So like Sage already said, the guy really started to reach the ranks of perhaps the most powerful shinobi in the Narutoverse at that point in the narrative. Clearly, it's extremely cracked. MS, you guys know the story, but yeah, jumping to Yellow Mask Obito, people don't realize, like I said, how powerful he truly is. Not only was he capable of controlling the entire Nine Tails via base Sharingan Genjutsu, but was also capable of engaging in a competitive battle with Prime Hokage Minato, with Minato, as we all know, being a light timer due to his feats against the Red Kage. He performed so well, in fact, against Minato, that Minato truly considered the possibility that a man this powerful and formidable had to be Mamoru Uchiha, and also admitted that this battle would come down to who hits who first, implying he was aware of the extremely small margin of error he had in this battle, again, due to Obito actually being a threat to him, and arguably even relative as well. So I am aware how crazy it may sound to some, hearing that a 14-year-old Obito was a threat to Prime Hokage Minato, but his calmly, his physical reaction time, his perception speed, his ability to infiltrate the leaf and control the Nine Tails simultaneously while combating Minato is just extremely impressive and blatant Kage level. I mean, there's no way to refute that. The guy was combating Minato on his turf with the Nine Tails being controlled simultaneously, and actually gave Minato a battle that came down to an extremely small margin of error, even admitted by Minato himself. So the guy is blatant Kage level. Now, whether you think he's above Minato, equal, or below slightly, he's Kage level. I would say at least mid, possibly high. I know that sounds crazy at this age for a shinobi, but the guy is actually that powerful. It truly is ridiculous how powerful he is. People don't realize it. But yeah, did you have anything to add to that, Sage, before we move on to like win conditions and the conclusion there for Obito's scaling here?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Like, it's widely debated, where this version of Obito scales. But at the end of the day, we actually get a direct comparison between this version of Obito and the version of Itachi that we're talking about, where
Yeah.
yes, they do acknowledge each other as opponents, but it's like it comes after Obito laughing at him and like mocking him, asking him if he thinks he could actually kill him. So not only do we get the implication that Obito is still above Itachi just narratively, but we also just know for a fact that Minato is above this version of Itachi, and any version of Obito that's able to even stay in the fight with Minato at all should be a problem for somebody like Itachi to deal with. The chapter, I think 238, chapter synopsis statement at the end of part 1 just states that Minato has unrivaled strength and that everyone sets off after him. This should include Itachi, and I would argue that Itachi at the end of part 1 should be stronger than he was right after the massacre, because he's had years to train with his Mangekyo abilities and potentially picked up the Totsuka blade and Yatamura along the way, as it is kind of implied that they're collectible. They may have come with his MS, but either way, he should be stronger there, in my opinion. So if that's the case, then Minato is just like unrivaled strength, right? Above him, and this Obito is able to at least somewhat compete with him. I am of the opinion that Minato still like scales higher, but like that hack from the Kamui is enough to be able to like at least put him on his heels and make him a little bit nervous. And I mean, really, what does Itachi have in his toolkit to be able to take down Obito here? We can get into this a little bit more later, but Kamui should just outright counter everything that he has. And I don't think that at this point in time he has the feats necessary to display that he can get around that ability yet. So I would say Obito probably takes this, especially if we throw in the Nine Tails summoning, but it's not even necessary, to be honest.
Yeah, so going down to just the conclusion and win conditions. Itachi perhaps is more intelligent, just with the lore, the statements, but physically, like Sage implied, he just doesn't have the scaling shown to be able to hang with someone of this caliber, someone that's hanging literally with Primal Kage Minato in a more impressive fashion than like the Rei Kage back in the day when Minato was a Jonin. It's just insane what he's able to do. So despite him perhaps having more intelligence, he would have a hard time due to the inferiority physically. And even if we give him the Totsuka blade, and Yatamir, and say that either it was an inherent ability or he already acquired the tools at this point in time, it would be very difficult to time Obito and figure out the workings of the Kamui before getting warped into the Kamui dimension himself, which, like Sage implied, is the most viable option for Obito, and also the missing character option as well. Obito would be aware, that Itachi is a threat to some arbitrary extent and would want to end it quickly, and he's like, let me just get him out of here real quick, remove him from the battlefield, call it a day. So that would by far be the most viable win condition for Obito. As for Itachi, it would probably have to be out strategizing him, perhaps catching him with Amaterasu or sealing him with the Totsuka blade. But again, that would be difficult due to the physical inferiority. But at the end of the day, the feats speak for themselves. There's just a gap in apparent ability between these two, with Obito being mid to possibly high Kage level. And again, I agree with Sage, he's not equal to Minato and certainly not above, but because of what he's accomplished, you can't refute the very fact that this guy is possibly like high Kage already at this age of 18, which is insane. So we would certainly say that more than likely, more times than not, Yellow Mask Obito would take this one due to his physical superiority and extremely cracked Kamui, as we all know. So that one's interesting.
Yeah,
but yeah,
just
go
to
ahead.
quickly add to that, I think like you have to keep two things in mind. Number one, Third Dad Book says that nobody can control the Nine Tails chakra like Madara, which we know after reading it that it's actually Obito, like he did during the Nine Tails attack. So the fact that Obito was able to control the full Nine Tails with his base Sharingan, and Itachi is just outright implied by that statement to not be able to control Kurama, just tells us that like even something like Tsukuyomi shouldn't work, especially from a 12-year-old Itachi,
Yeah.
let alone the older Itachi that Adabook statement would be referencing. So with that being sort of out of the way, you then also have to keep in mind the second thing, which is Minato thought that Naruto needed to master the Nine Tails chakra in order to take on Obito. And you could say like maybe this is attributed to Orange Mask, but like then you get into, okay, what's the difference between Orange and Yellow Mask? Is he that much stronger? Blah blah blah.
Right. Yeah.
And whenever you kind of consider the possibility that might be in reference to Yellow Mask Obito, and then you consider the fact that like we get statements about Naruto controlling Kuruma's chakra, but the only time we actually get a mirrored statement of him mastering Kuruma's chakra comes from KCM 2. That puts this entire battle into a whole different perspective. So yeah, I just think like the narrative implications of it, as well as the actual showings, just lean in the direction of Obito. Just wanted to add that in there on the end in case somebody came in and wanted to talk about Tsukuyomi or something else along the lines.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because that almost slipped my mind. Also, to add to that, Tsukuyomi, with Itachi being the very intelligent shinobi he is, he'd be aware, of perhaps more than likely of the resistance factor here with Obito accomplishing what he has, and he might not even use it in character. He might be like, well, this could be a toss-up, and if he breaks out, the amount of chakra I would expend might not be even worth it. So he might not even use it in the first place because of the very fact that, again, even the data books imply that this guy's Sharingan is on another level. His Genjutsu, and hence his Genjutsu resistance, is in a whole other tier that most people don't realize and often overlook or just don't know. So, yeah, all in all, Tsukuyomi would not be a win condition more than likely. It's very unlikely that would take it, and more than likely he would either resist it or just honestly just break out of it and it wouldn't even affect him. It's that simple, and in the end, more times than not, Yellow Mask Obito takes this one. But now, we jump to easily the most debated matchup in the community, I should say, out of the ones discussed here today in the fandom, without being Akatsuki Itachi versus Orange Mask Obito. But did you want to get into Akatsuki Itachi's scaling and lore first here and expand on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Itachi is an absolute animal.
Yeah.
So he does have the Totsuka blade and the Yada mirror, which can be huge advantages here. He does have the half body armored Susanoo in its fullness. He's got all of the things that he displays throughout the series, which make him incredibly impressive. And with all of that being said, he does have the arsenal to, if he utilizes his abilities correctly, take down Obito. I will say, whenever we get into Obito scaling and sort of win conditions, I do think Obito still has some counters to those, but at least now Itachi has not only the scaling to be able to keep up with somebody like Obito potentially, but also he has another couple pieces of his arsenal that will help him do this.
Yeah, certainly. So with Itachi, as Sage has already iterated, he's certainly one of the most powerful shinobi on the planet during this time. Even with his terminal illness, with him fodderizing the likes of Prime Orochimaru, and even garnering respect from even Obito on multiple occasions due to his prowess and ability as well. He's obviously much more experienced here as well, having mastered his MS to the highest degree, with the abilities we see on display, such as against Kakashi in Part 1, or when he combats Heavy Sasuke prior to his death. The only problem with Itachi is we never get to truly see his scaling, arguably, one, due to him being undercover and not wanting to fight fellow Konoha shinobi to the fullest extent of his abilities, and two, him being ill as well. But like Sage said, he has much better tools. He's the closest to his prime that we see in the narrative, despite his illness. And because of that, he's certainly blatant upper Kage level and one of the most powerful shinobi in the world. But now getting into Obito's scaling and lore in this iteration, again, the guy's crazy. He tricks the entire world into believing that he is Mamoru Uchiha due to just how threatening and powerful he is. When he infiltrates the 5 Kage Summit, he was first able to calmly into and out of Onuki's particle style prior to it attempting to deatomize Sasuke, only to then casually react to the Raikage, who attempts to attack him as well. Him doing this, and then even telling them his plans during the summit, only indicates that he believes that his abilities are more than likely enough to take out everyone in that room at that point in time, with them all attacking him obviously being a possibility, with this room being filled with tension and him being seen as Mamoru Uchiha at this point in time. Additionally, physically, you could upscale him at least to some arbitrary extent from his Yellow Mask iteration, as he is more experienced. He's closer to his physical prime, being older as well, and even knowing Uchiha secrets such as the Izanagi, and perhaps more than likely the Izanami as well, being very well versed thanks to Madara's education and during the time when he was with Madara while he was still alive. So Obito, honestly, is arguably the most powerful shinobi on Earth at this point in time, prior to the war arc. But did you have anything to add to that, and anything in regards to Orange Mask Obito scaling here?
Yeah, I think the statement that I brought up prior with Minato basically saying Naruto needs to master Kuruma's chakra in order to beat him, that would definitely apply to this version of Obito
Yes,
if it doesn't
yeah.
apply to the previous version. And because that statement of mastery over the Nine Tails chakra, again, control is stated, but the word mastery is never used until he gets KCM 2. That would just mean that KCM 1 and KCM 1.5 or MKCM, whatever you can call it, all the way up until he gets KCM 2, that wasn't identified as enough to bring down this version of Obito. So that just tells you sort of where the scaling cap needs to be in order for somebody like Itachi to take down this version of Obito. And Obito, I mean, he's cracked. You know, we talked about how he does have all of these different weapons in his arsenal as well. We get to see inside of the cave that he is using as his hideout. It's the cave that Madara kind of like brought him back to rehabilitate him. And he has all of the different weapons on the wall, like the giant chakra rods, the scythe, the Goombay fan, all that stuff. He has all that at his disposal. Now, whether he uses it in character or not until he gets White Mask version or whatever, like that's up for debate. But he does have those at his disposal, and this version of Obito again is just like, what anti-feats does he actually have? You know, like,
Literally.
he's such an animal. He's such an animal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think he's going to be a huge problem here. And whenever we get into like sort of the win conditions, I think that Itachi's going to have a really tough time taking him down.
Yeah, getting into win conditions for these two, starting off with Itachi, they would be similar to the previous matchup, with him having superior intelligence. Without strategizing, Obito being the most viable option for Itachi, having one-shot abilities such as Amaterasu and Totsuka Blade, with him being at his most intelligent and probably closest to his physical prime as well that we see. However, with his stamina and deteriorating health working against him, Itachi would have to use his chakra efficiently and also work quickly to avoid fatigue, of course, becoming a problem for him as well, as we all know that's something he's susceptible to. So, out strategizing would certainly be the best option. Using Amaterasu, perhaps timing him with the Amaterasu. Knowing Obito for much longer now, perhaps he has a better understanding of the Kamui. Being as thorough as Itachi is, that's possible, but of course it's all speculation. But yeah, the Amaterasu, Totsuka Blade as well, timing him with that. With all the tools at his disposal, with him at his prime, mentally at the very least, he would certainly have better odds than, the last matchup, but like Sage said, due to the statements, there literally be no anti-feats for Obito, it's very unlikely. And now getting to Obito's win conditions, he has a plethora of chakra. I mean, we know he has access to Hashirama cells. He has the tools that Sage stated that he could easily use, perhaps not in character, but he could easily use, and perhaps would against someone of the caliber of Itachi, especially chakra suppression. With the sort of kunais, the shuriken he uses in the war arc, that'd be very useful against someone with the flaws that Itachi has as well. Of course, Kamui would be the number one viable option. He uses that constantly, and he's in his physical prime, and he would probably deem Itachi's illness to work against him, and because of that, Kamui would be a very viable option as well. And logically, he would certainly use this more than likely as his number one option because he is aware of the threat Itachi presents. He stated that if Itachi knew my secrets, I'd be dead when, he gets almost caught in Amaterasu when Sasuke uses the implanted eye, or when he's in Konoha and he says, with that, thorn out of my side or whatever he says, I can now, use my plans freely, implying Itachi. So he would definitely be very, very wary of Itachi, not implying inferiority, but simply implying the fact that Itachi is very intelligent and very formidable. So yes, Kamui would be a very viable option. It's quick, it's effective, and it would get him the victory as quickly as he possibly could conclude this battle. So yeah, that would definitely be the best win condition for him. But did you have anything to add to that and to the win conditions for these guys here?
Yeah, I think that Obito I think the big thing here is that Obito automatically goes into it, number one, with a guaranteed win condition of fatigue, if he can just fatigue out Itachi.
Right.
And then, which is a huge deal, right? Because he's also really hard to hit. And then number two, going off of that, it's almost impossible for Itachi to get any of his win conditions off. Again, like we explained, Tsukuyomi shouldn't work against him.
Yeah.
Amaterasu was just almost outright told to us not to work against Obito in the data books. We actually get a shot of the entire page is going over Obito's Kamui ability. In data book 3, it's talking about like the mystery of his power and stuff. And there's one that says that he's left unscathed due to the Amaterasu. So like and it says as if he passed through the attack as if transcending into space. And some people have said, well, maybe that's Izanagi, but then it wouldn't make sense for him to be unscathed because you lose an eye when you use Izanagi.
Right, yeah,
So
yeah.
for him to have used the Izanagi, it wouldn't really apply as much there as it would for him to have used Kamui, which means that he can just phase through the Amaterasu, which probably means he can phase through the Totsuka blade, which then he has what? Izanami? Maybe Izanami works on Obito because his
Right.
mental state is shaken, but does Itachi know enough about that to actually be able to utilize it effectively? Because when we see him use it against Kabuto, a lot of people miss this, but in the chapter leading up to him using the Izanami, he is sort of like mentally breaking down Kabuto and preparing him for it, at
Right.
like telling him like you're not Orochimaru, you don't even know who you are, all these things, getting him sort of confused about who he is and kind of on shaky ground with his identity. And I don't know if he has enough information on Obito to make him do that. Like he genuinely still thinks this is Madara. So,
Exactly.
what's he gonna say? So, with all of that being said, I don't know if any of the win conditions that Itachi has would actually work against Obito, whereas Kamui, although Itachi may have a counter for that in like explosive shadow clones or in even just erecting the Susanoo faster than he can be warped away, he also has wood style, as Jay was talking about, and in the data book profile for his wood style, it says he can use the trees in the surrounding area. So
Oh
it's
my
like
god.
not only can he produce his own wood from the ground and from his cells, he can also just like launch trees at him potentially. And he does have the black receiver rods. He can't restrain Itachi with them without the Rinnegan, but he does still have those. Madara taught him the light and dark yin and yang techniques, which would include that. He does still have all those weapons that he can shoot out of the Kamui dimension. And again, he does still have Izanagi if he needs to pull that out of his back pocket. So I think at the end of the day, Itachi's going to have a much harder time putting down Obito than vice versa. So I think Obito should win this, probably via fatigue and then Kamui. But it's a really interesting battle to talk about because their arsenals are both so high.
Yeah, exactly. And we've kind of discussed this prior to the video. This essentially comes down to the margin for error. It's smaller for Itachi. The fatigue, the Kamui, the inferior physical prowess at this point in time, due to the fatigue and illness as well. Perhaps the biggest reason why he most likely loses this battle. The margin for error is so small, and although he probably has the intelligence advantage, he can't really make a mistake. One mistake, he's gone from that universe in a whole other dimension. So that's essentially the biggest reason why he'd fall more than likely against Obito. Obito, has so many advantages, mostly physically. The superior physical prowess, the Hashirama cells, the wood style, which he could use, which would be a great overwhelming sort of tactic to fatigue Itachi, where he had to perhaps evade all the wood coming his way, which would be a very good fatigue strategy as well. So in the end, the margin for error for Itachi is just smaller than Obito's is, and while Obito does respect him, and does see him, as a formidable shinobi, more than likely he would take it in this one. So we know that's perhaps the most discussed in the community, and it is interesting, and it is theoretically possible that Itachi could win, but again, it's less likely. So there you guys have it for that one. We now jump to the final matchup between these two shinobi phenoms, with this one actually being Edo Itachi versus White Mask Obito. Did you want to start off with this one and get into Edo Itachi scaling and lore a bit?
Yeah, so Edo Itachi is ultra impressive. I think he's actually one of the two Edos that we can directly point to that probably is stronger than he was when we last saw him, with
Yep.
the other one being Hiruzen. And I think the thing that those two share in common is that their bodies were sort of betraying them, Hiruzen with age and Itachi with illness. And the Edo Tensei may just counter that via the passive regeneration it provides. So with Edo Itachi, we actually do get to see that he scales above characters like KCM1 Naruto, potentially two characters such as early EMS Sasuke, who's kind of a MKCM Naruto rival. So his physicals are definitely superior to what we saw the last time he was alive. And then he also, because of this, and because of the unlimited refilling chakra that is provided from the Edo Tensei, he should just be able to spam Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, all of these things, the Susanoo, without really much issue. Now, we do know that Edos can run out of chakra, but then it just like passively rebuilds over time. So I do think that Itachi's biggest issue is removed in terms of him just getting fatigued. And one of the things that he had a massive disadvantage in prior to, in terms of like physical scaling, I shouldn't say massive disadvantage, but some disadvantage prior to due to physical scaling, is kind of eliminated now as well because White Mask Obito is on that tier of like MKCM in terms of his like physical combat speed. Then you also have Kamui to worry about, which is, puts him more so on the KCM2 tier. But
Yeah.
with Itachi, he has his entire arsenal he had before, but now he doesn't have the issues that he was dealing with that kind of nerfed him. So he is a more formidable opponent. And the biggest thing here is he has to be sealed away. So there's no just like killing him here. So he does go into this with two really big advantages. One in the fact that he now can just like fight unrestricted, and then the other, he can't just be killed. So those are two really big issues that Obito's going to have to deal with. But yeah, you want to kind of get into where White Mask Obito is at this point?
Yeah, that's a great breakdown of Itachi. So getting to White Mask Obito's scaling. The guy, as we all know, is truly overpowered at this point. He's able to physically react, combat, and compete with KCM2 Naruto, War Kakashi, and War Guy simultaneously up until Kakashi hypothesized correctly that him and the Masked Man share the same jutsu. That's truly impressive, especially KCM2 Naruto. With help, he's still able to react, compete, and at points outperform all three of them conjunctively, which is extremely impressive. He as well is capable of utilizing Rinnegan abilities, even taking control of 16 Shiriki simultaneously, and a lot of people don't even know this, even amping them even further thanks to providing them with visual prowess, which is actually even more impressive. So not only is he controlling them and kind of pulling them back from their own will, but he's enhancing them as well, which is extremely impressive. Hence, Obito at this point in the narrative is truly unmatched by everybody. At this point in time, almost everyone in the whole verse, it even seems implied, you could argue, that this is just a little bit of a wank, that perhaps he's even relative to Edo Madara, when they're standing side by side, and that's more of a narrative argument, but just wanted to add that in there. Additionally, he has the tools that he utilizes, such as the giant shuriken with the chakra suppression, of course the Rinnegan abilities, including the ones that he doesn't use but we do know he can use, such as all the abilities Pain used. Due to having the Rinnegan, he would be able to do the same. So Obito is just extremely, extremely formidable. KCM2 plus easily, extremely powerful, and truly arguably the second strongest shinobi on Earth at that point in time when combating KCM2 Naruto and company. But yeah, did you have anything to add to that before we jump on to the win conditions and conclusion of that one?
Yeah, no, I think that, like we brought up prior, the arsenal that he does have in the cave, whether it's in character or not prior to, it's definitely in character now.
Yeah,
we see him utilize those against, Naruto, Kakashi, like a bunch. He can like send out the giant rods that he has in there and pin down the eight tails and stuff. So
yeah.
He does have like just a crazy arsenal that I think Itachi is going to have a really hard time dealing with. And it's like, man, the Rinnegan might just like, he doesn't even use a bunch of the Rinnegan abilities, but it's sort of implied that the reason he doesn't is because the people he's fighting against have counters for them, and he knows that they have counters for them. So maybe you could imply that he would think that Itachi has counters for them, but like, really at the end of the day, like, what is Itachi gonna do if he uses a Bancho Tenin, pulls it into him, and then just like stabs him with a Rinnegan rod?
Literally.
Like a Reckless Susanoo, I guess, but then he just phases through it, tosses him, and like, I don't know, like summons more weapons. His wood style is more impressive at this point in time. Deep Forest Emergence is a real option for him. He's just broken, dude. So
Right.
yeah, I think you covered him really well. I just really want to emphasize how strong he is.
Dude, this guy, people don't realize I think Obito in general, they don't understand. This guy's a monster.
Yeah.
But so getting into the win conditions and sort of breaking this fight down, like Sage said about Itachi, Itachi's greatest advantages by far are his no fatigue and chakra depletion issues. He's essentially, like Sage said, he could spam jutsu, but he can't like infinitely spam it. Like he could spam it, it runs out. There's just like this passive generation of it. So it's kind of like this unlimited refill meter. So you can spam, but not infinitely. He has to like wait for it to refill, use it again and again. So that's by far his biggest advantage. And he's essentially at 100% at all times because again he's an Edo Tensei. It's like you're fighting a character at max power that stays at max power essentially. But Itachi, and the estimations of our scaling would be in between KCM1 and KCM2. He was able to simultaneously combat KCM1 Naruto and Killer Bee, even reacting to both simultaneously. And then arguably, I know people hate when I say this, arguably Blitz Pain or Nagato or rather when saving Naruto and Bee. But like Sage said, White Mask Obito is extremely overpowered. He was combating KCM2, Naruto, Kakashi, and Guy while having 16 Cherokee pull at him, trying to escape his control, and still had all this success, which is just extremely impressive. So, despite Itachi being in that KCM 1-2 range, White Mask Obito is, I think, at his peak without even the Jinchuriki pulling at him and him just having full chakra at his disposal, above KCM 2 in my estimations. So, he would probably have the physical prowess, at least early on before fatigue starts to kick in, and just the arsenal that this guy possesses. It's perfect for someone of Itachi's talents. The Kamui, of course, the tools that he has, such as chakra suppression. Perhaps it would help deplete temporarily Itachi's chakra reserve before it refills again. That would be very useful as well. The Renegon abilities he doesn't use, like Sage said. Perhaps he would be more so inclined to use them here, such as Bansho Tenin. Soul Extraction, which would work as a win condition against Itachi, because the only way to beat him is to extract his soul and seal him. You can't actually kill him. And another ability that me and Sage discussed prior to recording, the ability that Nagato uses against Hanzo when he is bloodlusted after Yahiko's death. We did conclude that it should work on Itachi. It is an extraction of souls. And it's a sort of a long distance ability as well. The human path requires touch, but that ability was sort of long distance. So if he could sort of incorporate that into his attack strategy, it would certainly be a very, very advantageous ability to use, having those dragons fly around at Itachi as to evade him, and then maybe he could like time him into his own fit body and touch him. Or, there's many strategies you could utilize here, Kamui as well. So that's another ability a lot of people forget about. Again, Obito simply just didn't use it here, most likely because the current company he was facing had sort of counters for that. So, but yeah, those are some of the win conditions. Did you want to get into that? Maybe who ends up winning this one in the end?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that people underrate Obito for is like they don't realize that he does have sealing jutsu. Not only does he have the 9 Phantoms Dragon Seal, which is a sealing jutsu, it like not even just to seal the soul, it also is just stated to be able to forcibly seal tailed beasts, which is actually like what's shown when Madara does it. So it can seal large masses of chakra, which would include the Susanoo. So he might be able to just use the 9 Phantom Dragon Seal to take out Itachi's Susanoo, and then it's like, okay, what does he do then? There's 9 of these things, they're going to be running at him, and they're incredibly fast. Like, Hanzo, who was just narratively massively above the Sannin, had to use his body flicker in order to get out of there. So it's like, he had to go far beyond his general speed scaling. And keep in mind, a nerfed Hanzo was relative to Mifune, and Mifune is like combating on par with like KCM1 level characters.
Yeah.
So like a more prime Hanzo would have been an absolute dog. We can't really get him to those KCM2 levels verifiably or anything, but like the fact that he had to use the body flicker, which is just stated to be speed beyond your general speed by a significant degree in order to escape this, is telling. And there were also like dozens of other shinobi that this was being used on. It wasn't just Hanzo. So you can make the argument that if he was just trying to attack Hanzo, then maybe it would have gotten him. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think that he has any counter for the 9 Phantoms Dragon Seal. Maybe you could say the Yatamir works against it, but you would have to show that the Yatamir can work omnidirectionally. I think it can, but if the attacks are too fast for it to like get around the rest of the Susanoo, maybe the back end of the Susanoo gets taken out while the front end of it like blocks a couple of the 9 Phantom Dragon Seals. And then if Obito is able to get in close, like maybe he wounds Itachi, and we know that like whenever Edos are severely wounded. They can't move very well. So
Yeah.
maybe he wounds him somehow with maybe one of the weapons or the Renegade suppression rods or something like that. He does have the 8 trigram seal. We see him use this on Naruto to seal the Nine Tails back into him. It isn't Minato who seals the Nine Tails into him. He tries to, and then Black Zetsu steals it. And then when Obito regains control over his body, he then takes the Nine Tails chakra and puts it back into Naruto. So he does have the 8 trigram seal. You could argue maybe he is able to like use other sealing jutsu to seal him away. But yeah, I think the 9 Phantom Dragon seal is probably his biggest win condition here, outside of potentially Kamui. Because if he uses Kamui, I mean, Itachi's just gonna be in there forever.
Yeah, it's like floating.
But it's like it would kind of like take care of him, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say the 9 Phantoms Dragon Seal is probably the way to go, and it's like I don't see any counter that Itachi genuinely has for him.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, the Yadomir perhaps, but again, you'd have to verify its speed of like omnidirectionality or whatever, and I don't see it being faster than like those dragons flying at him. So yeah, that's definitely like the most viable option. And calmly, like he would just be floating in the ether, I guess. You didn't really take care of him. He's like floating out there somewhere and forever. I guess
Yeah.
that's a win. Oh yeah, kind of just floating around. But yeah, so in the end, Obito is just scaling wise above him, just based off feats. The abilities he has, including the Funjutsu, the sealing jutsu that people don't realize he has, would be very advantageous in this position. He has multiple ways, both close quarters and long distance, to seal Itachi. Again, having the physical superiority, which would certainly aid him here, as well as Kamui, to avoid hits, as well as we all know. So, in the end, it comes down to margin of error. Again, Itachi, despite being in his physical prime and having infinite chakra, passive regeneration of chakra, the margin for error for Itachi would be smaller still because of the sealing jutsu Obito has, because of the physical inferiority to Obito at this point in time as well, based off feats. So in the end, Obito more than likely would win this one as well. Itachi could win perhaps with strategy, being in his physical prime, not having fatigue. It's theoretically possible. Maybe hit him with Amaterasu, just keep spamming it as his chakra meter refills, or the Totsuka blade, due to Obito perhaps being fatigued because he can't catch Itachi. But again, that's unlikely. I do believe he has, like we said, he has a physical superiority. So in the end, more times than not, Obito would win this one. And it just goes to show you how powerful it truly is. But do you have anything to add to that before we conclude the video?
No, that's about it, man. I think we covered it pretty good.
Yeah.
Itachi and Obito are both very popular and very powerful characters, but I do think that, as it typically goes in shonen and other anime and manga, whenever you have a villain or character in general that is introduced earlier into the story and then sort of killed off earlier into the story, and then you have another one that's introduced later and continues on, they just eventually end up getting more powerful. And so I think that's sort of the case of what happens here is like White Mask Obito is a late War Arc tier character, whereas Edo Itachi is an early War Arc tier character, and the power cliffing just continues to happen. So it's no shame for him to lose to White Mask Obito. And then for the other matchups, I think they can be fairly interesting, but Obito is just built up to be this like final big bad before the final big bad. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's the guy that like embodies Madara throughout the entire series. So while Itachi is super strong and does get, I think he gets 1 dub in here as the kid.
Yeah, the kid.
Yeah, he keeps it interesting throughout some of these, but Obito is massively underrated and just a gigantic problem for basically anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point with basic, like a generality as far as shonen anime. That there is this trend where that, the farther you get into the narrative, the more powerful opponents become and characters become. So it makes sense from a logical standpoint why Obito would win most of these matchups. And Itachi's my favorite character, don't get me wrong, but we are aware that this matchup is one of the most highly discussed in the entire Naruto fandom, but we had to be objective and give it how it truly is. And Obito truly is extremely powerful in most versions, even as a kid. I mean, he lost that one, but even then he's pretty powerful. So there you guys have it, folks. That is the video. Shout out to Sage again for being on the video. We definitely had to make this collab happen, and certainly was a good one. Feel free to leave any disagreements or any thoughts in general on our takes in the comment section below. And feel free to join my Discord or Sage's as well. He also has one. I'll leave the links in the description. Maybe you can speak with us or one of the many members about it. So anyways, hope you folks enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next video, folks. Stay classy.